Hi there. Welcome to Infinite Stories. This is the podcast where we sit down and interview everyday people just like you and me. This is your host, Mitchell Vine, and boy, do we have an incredible story for you. Let's jump into this week's interview.
All right, good. Well, let's kind of go back to the very beginning of your story. Who are you? Where did you grow up? What was it like being Bryan growing up?
Yeah, so Bryan, little boy Bryan, was born in Southern California, so in the suburbs of Los Angeles. And so I'm not sure how much details you want on stuff, Mitchell. So
All right, all up to you. How much do you want to share? Just paint the picture of the story.
yeah, so I was born into a non-Christian home. My parents I had two older sisters, so I was the first son, and when I was about 4, my parents divorced, and that kind of started a not so great season in life. You know, we were pretty poor and single mom with 3 kids, and then anyway, so mom married my stepdad, and my stepfather actually shared the gospel with my mom, and they started going to church, and so we were involved in Awanas and all sorts of we were the type of family in my early years that we were at church in the evenings more than we were at home. So whether it was Awanas or some other event, something going on, there was always something almost every night that it seemed like we were involved with. And so I pretty early in my life, I think had to have been kindergarten or first grade, somewhere in there. Felt contrition for sin. So I felt bad about and guilty about my sin. And so I just remember going to my mom and dad's bedroom, stepdad's bedroom, and just telling them that's what was going on. And so they led me through kind of the sinner's prayer type stuff. And so from a very early age in my life, there's always been kind of religious sentiment and things like that, as you would expect growing up in a Christian household. And so our poverty and church and right, those kind of tied together through our story. We moved around a lot. We got rent goes up, you can't afford it, we get behind on bills, we move. So pretty nomadic, transient type family. Actually, the house I'm living in now is the longest I've ever lived in a single place in my entire life. So 6 years in one house has been amazing. I hope it's another 50. And so really, our roots were sunk down in our nuclear family. My mom, my stepdad, I had 2 older sisters, and by that time, later on, two half brothers. And my father also moved first to Northern California and then further away to Chicago. So, it was just, even that part of the extended family was just not there. My dad tried to keep contact and things like that. He tried to be a good dad, but it's a distance. And he was supportive of my mom taking us to church and things like that. So 7-year-old Bryan, we went to the Pastor Cheyenne's pool, and very memorable because it was in the middle of summer in desertous region of Southern California, and it was very hot, and you could not play in Pastor Cheyenne's pool unless you were baptized. Sign me up, baby. So, yep. So I took the plunge, and I just kind of normal everyday life, right? I was a kid with ADHD, and so I was just very busy and scatterbrained, got in kind of normal trouble that kids would get in, some abnormal trouble that for other kids, but for ADHD kids, looking back, oh yeah, that makes perfect sense. Just kind of inattentive and forgetful and impulsive in a lot of ways. And so, all that was pretty good growing up as far as that goes. Not a great home environment, though. There was come to look back on it, certain abusive tendencies that were going on that I wasn't aware of. and by abusive, I'm not trying to downplay people who have had severe abuse. My stepfather's in prison now, and some of the physical abusive things were brought up to even Child Protective Services then. So, but I mean, we were still very much a church family, so it was kind of like, you had this public-private dichotomy, right? Where my mom would even say, "Put on your public face," right? Because we're going to church or going out to the stores.
I've heard that.
Yeah, it's kind of the definition of hypocrisy, Yeah, so we were wrestling with that. Not really wrestling. That's just the milieu, the culture, the environment we grew up in. And then this kind of stuff started changing though when I was in high school. Understandably, again, puberty's in play, hormones go off the charts, stuff like that. And I became very much a people pleaser, trying to find a friend group. And the easiest friend groups to find are typically the ones that you shouldn't be in, and so, again, that hypocrisy in my life, I would, indulge in my sin of, going out and drinking parties with air quotes friends, but then, indulging in pornography and things like that, but then having the canned answers for youth group and feeling bad about sin, right? That was a big thing. It's not that I was ever an atheist or something like that. Just I was lawless. So that just kind of categorized my life. I was in it for pleasure. I was in it for experience. I was in it for friends. I was, did swimming and water polo type stuff, wrestling a little bit in high school. I loved athletics. I wasn't any good, but it was fun, and it gave me a place to put my physical energy. At 18, I knew that college wasn't in the cards because I did not have a very good GPA, and my parents, we're a pretty poor family. It was known if you're going to college, it was on you.
Yeah.
So instead, I joined the Navy, and the Navy was kind of, again, in the heart of a hypocrite, there's always two reasons you're doing something, right? But that's maybe a little bit too harsh, right? Many of us have mixed motives with even Christians with things, but in my heart, I wanted to do something that outwardly looked honorable, right? People could see and think, oh, that's a good thing. You're serving them for our country. That's wonderful. In my own heart, I knew if I went into the Navy, right? Again, hedonism, loving pleasure was deep down in my heart. I could go see the world. I'd be in a fraternity of friends. I'd get paid, and I could drink. And so I got out of the family. I got out of the structure. I got out of the strictures that I felt like holding me down. Not holding me down, holding me in. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And so, but again, I'm just so thankful, right? Even to the Lord, even in all of this, even in this whole walking as an antinomian, as a hypocrite, in my lawlessness, going after my own pleasures, right? The Lord consistently still did give me friends, right? Friends I didn't necessarily want, but people in my life, whether it was a youth pastor or friends on the swim team or guys on the ship or buddies in boot camp, that the religious sentiment I couldn't shake it from me. I couldn't run away from his word. It was still there. I'd still feel guilty. Stuff would, and so, so that was just kind of like, my life where what you should be doing, but you're not doing it. You know what you should not be doing, and yet you're doing it. But unlike Paul, I didn't want to look to Jesus. I just felt bad about it.
Welcome to the club. Yeah.
So all that to say, I got to this place in the Navy where, right, I would tell my mom, I didn't want to lie to her because she would ask me, oh, are you going to church? I'd go into chapel, and I would be like, I don't want to lie. So I'd go to chapel like once a month or something, and just, and again, religious sentiment and mixed with kind of the emotionalism that often is with kind of evangelical type services. There's always kind of like this, that's right. I should be a Christian. I should do these things. And that experience would last for a little while and then wear off. But my conscience would be, soothed, and I would be able to not lie to my mom and keep moving.
Mm-hmm.
And so, zoom forward a couple years, about 2 years into my time in the Navy, and I was kind of making a mess of my life. So I got married to a girl that I didn't know very well, but we had, just pulling back curtains here, right? I was sexually immoral with this girl, and I felt like, I knew I used to wear a purity ring, right? Like I got to marry this girl. So I married her, go on deployment. And when I came back from deployment, she was gone. She had a boyfriend living with her at the house for months. I literally haven't seen her since the day we pulled in from deployment. So like even at the divorce proceedings, she wouldn't show up. We had to have paperwork for her not coming because she wanted no contact whatsoever. And so, I mean, I'd really like made a wreck of my life with all these different things. And as that happened, I just got, right. When you're depressed, what do you do when you love alcohol? You go drink more. And I started making, which it's just like people who like to drink think they'll drink out of their sorrows, but alcohol is a depressant. And so all it is, it's a downward funnel or spiral. And so, so that's where I found myself just making bad decisions. I made a really bad decision one day under being intoxicated. And so, one day my boss who was on the ship, he was a master chief. So in the military, you have different ranks, right? And so if you're on the enlisted side, you have ranks E1. So the bottom of the barrel is E1. That's somebody walking straight into boot camp. E9 is, you're the top dog. You can't get any higher than that on the enlisted side. And so my master chief came down to my shop. It was a little tiny room, about 15 feet by 15 feet. And he kicked everyone else out of the shop. And I thought, oh boy, I think I'm going to get kicked out of the Navy. I'm in trouble. And I'll never forget. Dan just asked me, he said, Bryan, have you ever heard of Nebuchadnezzar? No. I don't know who you're talking about. And again, this is just kind of the environment I grew up in, right? You memorize certain verses, you have canned answers for things, you know they're right. Yep. Jesus loves me, he died for my sins. But I'd never read the Bible. Just not my thing, it was boring. My parents tried to get me to do it. I wasn't interested in the word. And so Dan just laid out the story of Nebuchadnezzar. Here's a man who is filled with his own pride, and the Lord even told him that I'm the one who's given you your kingdom, and you need to honor and serve me and worship me. And Nebuchadnezzar goes out on his porch and looks at his kingdom, and he says, look at all I've built for myself. I'm pretty much self-aggrandizement, right? And the Lord drives him away to go eat grass in the field, and his fingernails grow long and his hair grows long, and he's like a beast. And it's at that point in the story that Dan Phillips just looked at me and he said, Bryan, how long are you going to eat the grass? You keep acting like you're able to do all this your way. But you know who you're supposed to be serving. And he was a good PCA Presbyterian deacon. He just stopped, prayed with me, and walked out of the room. Literally, he didn't give me any direction. He didn't say, this is what you should do. He didn't have me do the sinner's prayer. He didn't say, no, he literally just, he left me in that little 15-foot by 15-foot steel room, dim fluorescent lighting, wondering what just happened. And so I don't want to say that's the moment that I was converted necessarily, but that was the point at which somebody actually challenged me with the lordship of Jesus Christ. And so what the next couple years looked like was a radical undoing of everything that I loved. Drinking went to the wayside. I used to smoke a pack of cigarettes because that was what you did to have friends, right? You went to the smoke deck. And I'm not saying alcohol and tobacco. I'm not fundamentalist here, but for me, it was I needed to get out of those friend groups, and the Lord did that. And then we got this awesome chaplain on the ship. His name was Mark Loguide. He's an amazing man. And when you're on the ship, right, you don't get to choose who your pastor is. It's just whoever the Lord providentially puts there for you. And this guy was a conservative Lutheran Missouri Synod pastor, and he was so wise. The Lord gave him this insight that there was a small group of us. I think that at one point it was like 6 of us. It got down to a smaller number than that. But when we went on our next deployment a few months later, we went through the entire Bible in those 6 months, and he met with us Monday, Wednesday, and Friday nights from 1800 to 2200. So, no. I'm sorry. It was 8 o'clock at night to 10 o'clock at night. 20 to 22. And anyway, so he met with us consistently and just had us go through a book on all the doctrines of the Bible and just literally start and there's so many insights that I just never, the first time he explained, the first glimmer of the gospel in Genesis 3:15, it was like, what? That's in there? Or sitting down with him, and we were in Genesis chapter 1 the time before that, and this concept had never come across my mind. It shows you my pride, but Mark just looked at me with his steely blue eyes, and he said, "Bryan, God doesn't need you. He doesn't need anyone or anything." It was my first introduction to the aseity of God, that no, he is self-independent, right? He is. Right, he is and was and it was always to be. I'm contingent. He's non-contingent, and it was just that is a God I didn't know. Right? And then we get to throughout the Bible, but especially when we get to Exodus and then into the New Testament, he starts talking about redemption. And it's just it wasn't just that Jesus had to die for my sins. It's not just a sugar gospel, right? But the very second person of the Trinity did not count it, as something to be grasped, but emptied himself and took on the form of a man. And God redeemed me with the blood of his very own son, not with silver or gold, right? But God didn't spare any cost. And then I remember reading through the book of Galatians, and I got to Galatians 3 and 4, and I was just weeping that how is it that God would adopt me as a son? With all this, and this was the beauty of the gospel, right? It was that while I was yet a sinner, Christ died for me. And God knew that sin. And he put me in a Christian family, and he put the Bible in front of me. Our tradition has these beautiful words that I love in baptism, where it says the efficacy of baptism is not tied to the moment of administration. And just thinking the Lord in his good plan, right? It wasn't a mistake. All the different things he did in my life to bring me to himself. And the Bible became just this amazing life to me that, right? I remember it was weird. I was sitting in they're called locker rooms. It's kind of like a fire station on the ship, and it's just where you have all the gear. And we were doing a missile onload. So so when we were going out to deployments, and they're actually bringing on all the ammunition, all the bombs, and all the missiles and stuff. And so my job was damage controlment, so firefighting. And you sat in this little room with your firefighter's suit halfway on, just waiting. If anything, went sideways, you could be there within 15 seconds, And it was boring. I mean, you'd sit there for 6 hours at a time. It was 6 hours on, 6 hours off, back and forth, back and forth. But during that 6 hours, you could do whatever you wanted. right? As long as you were there and you were ready.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I got buddies over there playing the guitar, and another couple buddies are over there playing video games or something. And I was just, kind of lounging back, relaxing. But the thing that I realized I had become a weirdo was I was reading my Bible. And it wasn't like this conscious thing, right? Before, every time I had read my Bible, if I had ever brought my Bible out in front of anyone, it was for show, right? But this was like, it was unconscious, just, I want to read my Bible. And so I was reading my Bible. And then, I don't know, after a while, I looked up and I realized, you know how weird you probably look to all these people, Bryan? And I was just like, I don't care. I don't care. So I just kept reading, it was just too good. And so anyways, all that to say, the Lord was gracious. I lost a whole bunch of friends, and that was good. And in the subsequent months, the Lord gave me different friends. I met people at chapel, I met people at Bible study. And so my social group started to change, and that helped kind of repent of putting to death a whole bunch of sins that needed to be mortified, and then learning patterns of righteousness. And I ended up joining a PCA church in Hampton, Virginia. And again, the Lord is gracious. I had a horrible credit score at that time, and so I needed a place to live. And there's this program with the Navy. If they're able to, a landlord is able to take their rent directly out of your paycheck, and so they won't do a background check, credit check. And I thought, oh, sweet, great, so I'll just get one of those apartments. It's near the shipyard. That would be awesome. Come to find out, I didn't know the area very well. Come to find out, I moved a block and a half away from the church that the guy who shared the gospel with me was a deacon at.
Oh.
And so I just started kind of attending there, and the associate pastor, his name is Byron Snap. He's down in Tennessee now. He was just awesome. I'd go into his office and I'd say, "Hey, Byron, I've got these questions. I've been reading my Bible about this," and he'd give me some books, and I'd come back and I'd have more questions because of the books, and he handed me more books, and this would be like somewhere between 1 and 3 times a week, and it would be like, in his office for like 5 minutes. It'd be like 2-3 hours in his office. The guy was so patient, and I didn't know what he was doing. He was discipling me the whole time, right? Just, I have questions about prayer, and he'd answer that. I've used the Lord's name in vain before. He says in the 3rd commandment that he will not hold him guiltless who misuses his name. Have I committed the sin of, unpardonable sin? Am I going to be condemned? And just like this, and just gently, Bryan, no, that's right. That this unpardonable sin, and he explained to me, right, dying without belief and rejecting Christ even unto death, and so just very slowly, right? Sometimes very basic questions, sometimes deeper questions, and so all I knew is I love the Bible. I wanted to learn more about the Bible, and it was my chaplain and Pastor Snap and Dan Phillips and a couple other Christian men on the ship who I'd kind of gotten to know. I was kind of surprised. I loved the Navy, Mitchell. I mean, it was good. Navy's pretty easy if you can pass tests and stay out of water, or stay out of water raids. If you could just not get in trouble, you can get advanced, and it's pretty good, right? You get paid, right? It's sweet. And so that was my trajectory. For some reason, I didn't have my re-enlistment paperwork signed. I literally had it all filled out. I was the career counselor for our division, so I had gone through all this. I had it ready so I could sign, and something just kept me from signing it. I don't know, I'll procrastination, just do it later. And it was right about the time I should have been signing my re-enlistment paperwork that those Christian mentors in my life started saying, we think you should go to college. Maybe you should think about studying the Bible and being a pastor. Which was either really insightful or really dumb of them, because I was only a Christian for like a year. I was like, I don't know about this,
I appreciate it, but no.
Well, but I trusted these guys, right? Like these were the men who were speaking truth into my I'll get out. What's the worst that happens? I go get a degree and I re-enlist as an officer, or not re-enlist, but sign back up as an officer, right? Just go to OCS or something. That'd be fine, right? It doesn't hurt my career to go get a degree. And the GI Bill is there. This was even before the new GI Bill. The new GI Bill is sweet, man. They pay for your housing and they pay for school. It's I got transferred onto that to finish my bachelor's and my first master's. But these guys I think were smart. I just listened. I listened to these godly men who told me, and so I left. I got out of the Navy and I went to community college out in California, and I was going to study history. And my plan was go study history, because that's what Pastor Snap told me to do. He said, you need to learn how to read and how to think and know how we've gotten to where we are at seminary. Then that's when you'll get your Greek and Hebrew and stuff like that. So he actually advised me, take Bible class and stuff like that, but don't go don't go get a Bible degree, which I thought was odd, but I was like, okay, I trust Pastor Snap, so that's fine. Right.
Yeah.
And the nice thing is, history is the only class outside of PE in high school that I ever got an A in. So I was like, well, hey, I think I know it. So hey, cool, that's fine. But I had a hard time at community college, right? It was a secular school, and I was just having a rough time. Again, I got around kind of some friends who weren't Christians, and some bad old habits started creeping back up, bad sins started creeping back up, and I was just like, I can't keep doing this. And I was like, this is not where I want to be with my life. I'm still a very young Christian, and I need to learn how to think from other Christians. So I had met a girl at that time, and she was from Eastern Ohio, so right by the Pennsylvania border. And so Geneva College and Grove City were high on my priority list because they were close to that cute girl I liked. And so,
Checks out.
yeah. Grove City didn't take the GI Bill, but Geneva did, so Geneva it was. So by that time, I knew that I was Reformed and things like that. So my theology was kind of getting calcified, but I still knew I needed to be discipled, and so that's where I went. I went to Geneva, and I did my bachelor's there, and my wife and I got married, and the Lord's just done amazing things. I mean, my birthday was yesterday, and I was sitting there just spending some time praying and thinking about, and this was not in preparation for this. This was literally just me praying and thinking, just like, man, God's been so good. Right, we just had our 5th baby. His name is Judah. My wife is amazing. She's a godly woman. She's so strong and she's so courageous. The Lord's called us to this amazing little church in the middle of cornfields in Iowa with people I absolutely love.
You're in Iowa?
Yeah.
I'm in Iowa.
Where are you at?
I'm in Mount Pleasant, like southeast Iowa.
Okay. You're joking with me right now, right?
No.
Okay. You ready for it?
Yes.
I am between Morning Sun and Mount Pleasant, or Morning Sun and Mediapolis.
No way. That is incredible.
We're like half an hour away from each other. Nobody's from Southeast Iowa, man.
Nobody's from Southeast Iowa.
Yep.
Well, we'll have lots more to talk about after the podcast, son.
Yeah. So the Lord called us to this little country Reformed church out here, and it's I couldn't imagine a better place to raise our children and to serve these people here. And yeah, the Lord's just been so kind, right? I just find myself speechless when I come to this point. It's just, even if if Job happens to me tomorrow, I know my Redeemer lives, right? He's good. Yeah. Yeah,
and you've already seen him change so much in your life. Like, even if you had a Job situation, you know that it would have been for the better somehow, even if we couldn't see it. That's for sure.
Yeah, no, I mean, I hope that's the case, right? But I mean, the Psalms are full of laments, right? Crying out to God, right? I was just praying to the Lord this morning, please don't lead me into temptation. So I don't want to act like I'm strong enough to do these things on my own. So I hope that's not what. I don't want to be like, oh yeah, I'll just be that guy. I'll be, whatever happens will happen, right? No. I'm saying, once you taste and see that the Lord is good, right? There's joy to be had. So
that is amazing.
Yeah.
That is amazing.
So that's where I am.
Yeah. So that's where. So what did anything happen or change in between graduating school, getting married, and having kids? How did that all come into be, story-wise?
Yeah, so I met my wife at a Christian conference that her parents went to, and took a group of kids from they ran a Christian school, and so they brought a whole bunch of kids down every year. And be honest with you, right, I wasn't looking for a relationship. I was still, right, I was a pretty new Christian, and I just, previous relationship was still pretty fresh in my mind. I was just like, I got to grow in the Lord. This is not what, right? So I went to this conference as like high school and college age kids, and I sat in the back by myself reading my books because I'm a nerd, and just, right, I was reading 4 different books at one time, and that was what I was excited about, just read my books. And this family sat behind me, and now it's my mother-in-law. She lives with us now, and she just leans over and she's like, "You must be a very avid reader." And I was like, no, I just can't figure out which book I want to finish. So I'm just like reading. But she was impressed that I wasn't chasing the girls, and I was just, right, I was listening to these lectures because I wanted to, and I was there to learn, and I was there to read, and didn't know before that this was the last time they had planned on going to this conference, and they had made a purpose to go to find their daughter a husband. So apparently I got set up and I didn't know it, and I'm okay with that.
God was moving the pieces around. It's like,
yeah. So we courted, and we did that real formal courtship stuff. And again, that was good for me. I know, right, it's a sad thing to see where things like with Joshua Harris has gone and stuff like that. But for me, coming out of my background, I needed to have self-imposed structures and rules. And so we had a very formal courtship, and that was good, right? Lots of letter writing, lots of time on the phone. Lots of distance between the two of us. She was in Ohio, I was in California. And then when I moved to Pennsylvania, I would see her on the weekends and stuff like that. We'd go to church together. But that distance was actually good, because then I got to know Olivia as Olivia, and not as, I became fond of Olivia for her heart and who she was. And now it doesn't hurt that I think she's drop dead gorgeous, right? And so that's just a nice perk. Thank you, Lord.
Bonus, yeah.
And so, we started having babies pretty early. We had Nathan as our firstborn, and then Deborah. We had Nathan my senior year of Geneva. So when I was finishing up my BA, but I kind of got scared of being a pastor, to be honest with you. I was reading John Piper's book, Brothers, We Are Not Professionals, and he talks about how in one of the chapters he says, if you are not willing to actually listen to the call to be an evangelist, to do the work of an evangelist, you should not be a pastor. I thought, whoa, I don't like knocking on doors. I don't like handing out tracts. I shouldn't be a pastor. And so I mean, that's a pretty narrow view of what evangelism is anyways, but growing up in a Baptist type, knock on doors, hand out tracts type in background, that's all I thought evangelism was. And so anyway, so I liked history, found out I was pretty decent at it. And so I thought, okay, well, maybe I should go teach history, but I'm not sure. Maybe I should be a pastor. I'm still wrestling with this. The church thinks I should be a pastor, but just internally, right? This is my struggle. So, so I went to Trinity Evangelical Divinity School, and I did a master's in church history. So that's north of Chicago in Deerfield, Illinois. And I thought, well, go study church history, right? And if I'm going to be a pastor, it's not going to hurt me. If I need to go and do a PhD in history or church history to go teach history, then it's not going to hurt me either, right? So it's a win-win situation. It'll be fine. We did that, and it was like the first week I was there, I was talking to one of my buddies. I'm still friends with him now. His name is Kirk. and we were just kind of talking, and he was like, so why'd you do this instead of going to seminary? And I kind of told him, but we had spent a while together before this. And he was like, hold on. So you mean when you're mowing your Roman Catholic neighbor's lawn so that way you can have conversations and invite them into your house and talk with them about Jesus, you don't think that's evangelism? I was like, And he's like, and when you were talking to the guy in your work truck when you used to clean carpets and you would talk to him about the gospel all the time, you don't think that was evangelism? And I was like, well, I guess now that you say it like that, oh, okay.
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah. Oh, maybe okay. So maybe hospitality and evangelism can go together, and maybe, friendship evangelism. Maybe I'm just not naturally inclined towards contact evangelism, right? I didn't have these categories in my, but I still didn't know what I was supposed to do. I kind of freaked out. I almost went back into the Navy. We found out we were pregnant with our third child, second son, Daniel. I thought, man, I got to feed these kids. I don't know what I'm going to do. You can't feed kids on a grad student salary. So I thought, well, there's no salary. It's just hodgepodging together jobs.
Yeah.
And so I thought, well, okay, maybe I'll go back into the Navy for just finish out 10, 15 years, something like that. And then come back to the studying stuff later. The church asked me to put a pause on that. And if you're familiar with Presbyterians at all, have you seen the movie Zootopia?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. In Zootopia, you have Flash, who does the 100-yard dash, right? The sloth.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes the administration and mechanisms of Presbyterians are like that scene of the DMV. Mm-hmm. The job will get done, but it's not going to be fast, right? It's just slow. But the Lord lined things up where within a 2-week time span, the elders of that presbytery had a meeting, and they told me, we think you should go to seminary. We don't think that you should go into the Navy. We think you should go to seminary. I thought, okay, but how am I going to afford it? And then the church we were members of, I was an intern of when I was back at Geneva, that little tiny church, essentially, I mean, it was like overnight. They elders had a meeting, and then like 2 days later, the congregation had a meeting, and they said, yep, just come to seminary and we'll take care of you. And I was like, well, I don't know how that's going to work, but okay, we'll do it. So I went to Reformed Presbyterian Theological Seminary. It's a little tiny seminary that our denomination has out in Pittsburgh. Very different than the seminary I'd just come from, which was a very large seminary, very academic-minded. RPTS is a pastors pastoring pastors, right? And so everybody there who is teaching has been a pastor, and they're very pastoral in how they're teaching and very mindful that what they're doing is not training up academics, but training up pastors. And so while it's hard academically, I mean, it's still a master's level. It's a difficult program to get through. They have a different goal in mind, and so it was a great place. My wife and I, to make ends meet while we were there, opened a photography studio. We kind of got into photography in Chicago, and the Lord brought us a friend in the church whose name is Michel Serret. And he's won Army Photographer of the Year a few times, or at least once. But I mean, he's constantly up there. He's an amazing photographer, and we didn't know it at the time. And he was just awesome. I mean, I was like, well, I don't know about if I should spend money on this lens or this lens, thinking about doing this more professionally. And he would just hand me a bag that's got like $5,000 worth of gear in it. And be like, yeah, try out what you want. Give it back when you're done. But I mean, amazing, right? But he would also like sit down and teach me, right? Like we'd go to his house, and he'd be like, okay, so here's the exposure triangle, and here's how you get these images exposed correctly, and et cetera. And so like he took my wife, he and his wife would photograph together, and so the two of them took my wife to go photograph a wedding to see like if that'd be something. And Olivia loved it. And then again, just God's writing this story, right? Because then my dad has this friend that I don't even know how he had this friend, maybe from the auto industry. My dad used to do auto class type stuff. This is my biological father. He just knows this guy in Chicago who happens to live 15 minutes down the road from us. And my dad's like, hey, I'm going to get a hold of Brian, and I'll just ask him if he'd be willing to meet with you and teach you some stuff. And I was like, oh, okay. And all of a sudden, before I know it, Brian Landerman's in our apartment, and he's teaching me how to do photography, and he's taking me to weddings to learn from him. And he's like, oh, yeah, for Jeff, I'll do anything. And he's just like, you don't know me from Adam. But but these people just decided that they were going to be generous and teach me. And so so we got there to Pittsburgh. To our studio is actually in Beaver Falls. And we had a legitimate studio space. And again, that's God's story. They were talking to somebody at church afterwards. They got this empty building, and I'm like, hey, what do you guys do in that building? Like, oh man, we've been thinking about renovating it for a while, but we don't know. You want to come check it out? And I was like, yeah, I don't know, sure. We go check it out. And I mean, it was like storage room, no studs, ugly concrete floor. But in my mind, that's a blank space, right?
Yeah.
There's nothing, you could do whatever you want in here. And they're like, well, why don't we work it out where there's essentially a revenue share, right? Because we know that you're a brand new business. Why don't we do revenue sharing? And so we're essentially buying into the company, saying, we think you guys are going to do well. And as soon as the revenue share hits fair market value for rent, we'll just start charging you rent instead. That's crazy. Who does that?
That's right, generous.
Beyond generous, yeah. So but that's what they did for us, And so that was a hard year, right? Because it was building a studio and building a business and going to seminary and being an intern and being a father of 3 kids and a husband. It was 85 hour a week worth of work, and I was thankful for the Lord's Day because I didn't work on Sunday, and so I just went to church and slept. It was great, and played at the park with the kids next door. But yeah. So the Lord got us through that, and we let go of the photography business when the church here. I graduated from seminary. The church here called us, and we've been here since 2018 now. So for 6 years. So. Wow. And we love it. We love Iowa. We love this place. We love these people. And I get to tell people about the God I love with the best news that I could ever tell them. So.
That is amazing. That is incredible. The way that your story just naturally flowed out of you. Typically I have questions that I ask people, but you nailed every single question, almost the exact order that I would typically ask. And by the end of it, I can just kind of close my hands and sit back and now I'm just going over your story in my mind of the redemption in your life is so clear. The power of the gospel redeeming you from point A to point B and even to where you are actively in between B and C, right? Yeah. God's redemption is so clear. The work of the Holy Spirit is so clear with your marriage, with your family, with the business, with your whole lifestyle that you are living. Anybody who listens to that, it wouldn't be a good story if God didn't intervene. You know what I mean? It would be a very hard story to listen to.
Yeah. But, I mean, there's too many things that were outside of my control, not what I wanted, and the Lord in His wonderful sovereignty and way of saying, boy, you don't know what you actually need. I'm going to give you what you desperately need. Man, I couldn't. And
it's Himself.
Yeah, right. I was just talking to people about that on Sunday, right? Guys, do you get it? In heaven, we get God, right? Heaven isn't about the streets of gold, or it's not about seeing your friends. All that stuff is going to be cool, but we get to join the myriad of angels worshiping the Lamb who sits upon the throne. Right? We get Jesus Himself, right? We get to live with God forever. We get the new heavens and the new earth, and we get Him. How could the story be any better?
It can't. It definitely can't. And anybody who thinks that it can't be better, they just don't know yet, realistically.
Yeah. So this is one of those things, right? I'm not a big person on telling my testimony, especially the early part of my testimony. And I was a little bit hesitant to come on here, to be honest with you, because a lot of times with stories, it's almost like the person with the biggest and baddest conversion story wins. And I just sit there and I'm like, what some of the stories I love? I love when we examine people as elders before they take the Lord's Supper for the first time. And some of my favorite stories are when people will say things like, well, I never knew a day in my entire life that I didn't know and love Jesus. And I'm just like, I hope my kids have that story, right? Like they know their sin and they have to confess their sin. But right there, every person has a story of redemption. Some people it's like, a room as dark as night, and then somebody just flings the door open and turns on the lights. And then other people, they have sunrise conversions where it's just like, you get that first glimmer of light and it's like, oh, it's coming. And then a little bit later, it's like, oh, look, the sky's being painted. The night sky is receding. Oh, look, there's the reds. There's the magentas. Look at the purples as it transitions. And then by the time you get to the full gloriousness of the sun rising up, you're like, oh, yes, it's great. And I love hearing even people's conversion stories like that, when they're able to say, like, my grandma, she taught me about Jesus. And then the Lord brought this pastor. And then my parents, did this. And then I went to this summer camp. And it's just like, and then they come to that place where they're like, and God's mine, right? Like, and they own it for themselves, right? Those stories are awesome too.
Oh yeah. And honestly, that was the original heart beyond this podcast as a whole. Is I did not like sharing my redemption story growing up. I did not like sharing my testimony because, just like you said, like, I don't really have a fantastic story, in my opinion, right? Like, if I was to retell my story beginning to end, I could be like, it's kind of short and sweet. Like, I can draw it out and I can add in as many details as I want, but realistically, I was a horrible person, still am a horrible person, but God is good and He redeemed me. And after He redeemed me, I'm still a horrible person, but His grace and His mercy is sufficient for the rest of this life, and it's preparing me for the next one. And so I didn't like sharing that story, but then I started to hear other people share the same exact story as me. And then I had to make that shift in my mind of like, well, how can we have that kind of story that God has given us and still not glorify Him? Like, how can we rob Him of that and say that our story is not worth sharing? Because in reality, if He wrote it, it's good and it needs to be told.
Yeah, it's
and
His
it
glory.
Needs to be shared. Yeah. And so I don't want to rob God of the glory anymore in my story. And I also want to encourage and challenge people to do the same thing of just like, for anybody who says that they don't have a story worth telling, I can very gracefully and passionately say, you're so wrong. And I'm glad you're wrong. Because if God wrote your story and you are redeemed and you have been covered by the blood of Jesus Christ and you're filled with the Holy Spirit, you have the best story on planet Earth to share. And
Amen.
You can only share it. Like, that is your responsibility. It's not my job to share your story. You know what I mean? And so there's so much in that. And I'm even so grateful that this is what I get to do for a living now, is teach people to tell their own stories. That's what I do. And that wasn't my idea. Like, I can't take the glory for that. I didn't want to do this with my life. And there's so many extra details that go into it. But as I was kind of like thinking back throughout your story, do you see yourself as a guide and a mentor now being in that pastoral role? And do you see kind of the responsibility and the joy that those other men in your life got to experience while walking through with you? What does that look like for you now on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, right. So my pastor for about 8 years, his name is Micah Ramsey. He's out in Eastville, Pennsylvania, a little tiny town of like 60 people or something like that. Micah talks about spheres of domain, right? And so you always start with, I do it like a bullseye, right? Like the bullseye is my closest sphere, and that's my own family, right? So now I get to teach my children, right? I do the Bible time for our home school with them, and I'm the one who does family worship if I'm not there, right? That's different, but right, I get to lead them in teaching them to sing the songs of praise. I get to lead them in teaching them the truths of the Christian faith, and so it starts first with my family, right? Like I get to pray with and for my wife every night. There's that first aspect, right, is my family. And then in the congregation, right, there's certain men that I text message somewhere between 3 and 4 times a week typically, and just sharing Bible passage with them and praying for them, and just trying to encourage them as Christian husbands and fathers. And then, right, so there's kind of like that core group of guys that I'm actively discipling. I'll meet with a couple of them for coffee regularly, and then, right, Bible studies, right? I do a lot of Bible studies because I love teaching people the Bible and just going through entire books of the Bible and look how amazing God is and what's he teaching us here. And then, right, like I try to preach in such a way that it's discipleship in preaching, that there's things people can kind of latch onto and walk away from. And then even in the afternoons, I do a time that's called, I call it chalk and talk, right? It's essentially me nerding out and playing devil's advocate. So if there's stuff in the sermon, like archaeology type stuff, language things, stuff like that, then I'll do that. I'll show pictures and kind of nerd out. And then I'll specifically kind of like, okay, start asking questions of people. So why do you believe this? Why do we say that? How do we defend against that? No, and I'll just kind of ask a lot of Socratic type questions and kind of push people that way. And so it's kind of like group discipleship. And then I teach Sunday school classes and things like that. And there's lots of times that people just have questions and we talk. And then every day, like I said, Monday through Friday, I do this is kind of background, right? But the philosophy behind why I do this is tied to discipleship. I realized one day I preach right around the first week of every year, I preach a sermon on being in God's Word. And I put out Bible plans in the back of the church and encourage people to whatever Bible plan they're going to do, to just go ahead and choose one and try to be in the scriptures that year. And I realized as I was doing that one time that I could be preaching a lot at people and almost seem like whipping them like a cowboy, like, go read your Bible. Right. Like, but that's not what I want to do. And I know certain people are auditory and visual people, and they have a hard time reading. And so one of the things I realized is a lot of the devotionals out there aren't actually going through the scriptures. They're just kind of topical here, there, whatever. And I was that type of person that, like, okay, I'll read this little thing, and just get on, but never actually systematically working through the Bible. And so in 2020, when COVID hit, I realized, you know what I could do? I could just do this myself. And so I started going through the Gospels, just pericope by pericope, section by section, and just asking 3 questions. So I learned this Bible study reading method a long time ago. A, what's this about? B, what's the best verse to summarize this? C, what am I called to do in response to this? And so I sit down and I do it either by myself or my kids will join me from time to time. And so we've gone through the Gospels, we've gone through the wisdom literature, we've gone through huge parts of the New Testament. We've gone through the first 4 books of the Bible. We're in Deuteronomy right now. And then after Deuteronomy, we'll finish this year in Hebrews. And so just like, and I know that in our congregation, I know in other people message me too, like that is their primary devotion, because that's their time that they can read through the Bible and just sit and digest and think and pray about it themselves. And so that's kind of like, but spending inordinate amount of time with people, because people need people to spend time with, as well as trying to saturate that time in the Word and in prayer is kind of where anything I can do to encourage people that way. That's what I'm trying to do.
That's good. So if we kind of took a step back and looked at your story as a whole, well, actually, before I ask that, I need to ask another important question. I can tell that you are a book person. Are you a movie person as well? Do you prefer one over the other?
So I read a lot more books than I do movies. I'm probably the most culturally illiterate person, unless it's a kid movie, then I might know it.
Okay. So we can work with this then. So we'll lean on the book side. So if there was a book written about your life, what would it be called?
So C.S. Lewis, in his autobiography, he calls it Surprised by Joy. I would probably title mine Redeemed for Joy.
Why?
The first question of the Catechism, of the Westminster Shorter Catechism, is, what is your chief end of life, right? The chief end of life is to glorify God and enjoy Him forever, right? I'm redeemed to take my joy in him, the one who redeemed me. And so, yeah.
It's enough said. Yeah, it's kind of interesting that you could say something so simple and let it just be so powerful, and you could break that apart for the rest of your life if you wanted to, but that's sufficient. It really is. That's amazing. So as we're kind of coming up on the end of the questions, because technically you
Mhm.
nailed most of them without me asking, so thank you. Appreciate that.
You
Only
didn't give
one
them to
other
me ahead
person
of time
has.
either.
That's true. That's true. Sometimes I do that. So that was not the case this time. But as we're kind of coming to the end of it, is there anything that you would say to challenge or encourage anybody who is scared or intimidated in sharing their story? What would you say to them?
The Lord has not made any mistakes in your life. And as we look through the Bible, we don't find perfect people. You don't find Adam perfect, but you find God's story of redemption. You don't find Abraham perfect, and yet you find God's story of redemption. You don't find Noah perfect, and yet you find God's story of redemption. You don't find David perfect, and yet you find God's story of redemption. You don't find Samuel perfect, and yet you find God's story of redemption. You don't find any, even the apostles, perfect, and yet you find God's story of redemption. Because the story of redemption is about Jesus Christ. And so you don't need to be scared about the imperfect parts or the hard parts of your life. The Bible is a story of redemption. And the only one who gets to claim that their life is perfect is the one who is tempted in every way as we are, and yet without sin. That's one of the things I love about the Bible is it doesn't hide from us who we are. Because we need to understand who we are. So we look to him and we get to rejoice that it's not about us. That he saved us from us. He saved us to be with him. And so often our fear is because we've tied it into our shame, or, people might look down on you, or people might not think the same way about you. But when we do that, we forget the gospel. Again, right? He loved us while we were yet sinners. And so we don't need to be ashamed that we were sinners, and that we are sinners, and that we're saved by grace. God's not ashamed of that. So don't be, I'm not saying to revel in your shame. That's not what I'm saying, right? Don't hear me wrong there, but we have a glorious God who has done amazing things. And I think he gives us all throughout the scriptures a pattern of being able to, as one missionary said it, right, paint the picture with warts and all, right? Because when we point to Christ, he gets the glory. And people won't look down on you. So that's what I would say.
That's good. That's good. Well, then, I technically only have one last question then. Is there anything else that you sense the Holy Spirit wants you to share for anybody who would be listening to this podcast?
We live in a time and age, especially in the next 90 to 100 days, where the world would love you to do nothing more than to take your eyes off of Jesus Christ, to put your hope in a kingdom of man, and to forget that if you talk more about the powers and the principalities of this world and not about the Prince of the kingdom of heaven, reorient your heart. Don't forget your joy. Don't forget the one who is your hope and your redemption, and whatever happens in the wars and rumors of wars, the setting up of kingdoms and the tearing of them down, the Lamb still reigns. Keep your eyes fixed on Christ.
That's good. That's good. Well, I started this podcast, and as I was doing so, I kind of panicked when I reached the end of my first interview with someone, and I looked at them. I was like, I don't know how to end this. Is there
You pray
anything
for
that
us,
we
man.
should do? We definitely did. Yeah. And as I looked at my first guest, and he was like, well, let's just have a high five. And after that high five, we just end the podcast right then and there. I was like, that's genius. But then I transitioned to doing this virtually with people typically. And so now I just asked my guests to do a virtual high five with me, like counting down.
Okay.
So pick a number between 1 and 10.
3.
3. All right. So on the count of 3, we will just high five either the camera or the screen or whatever it looks like to you. And then after that, the podcast will be done. All right.
All right.
Okay. 3, 2, 1.
Thank you so much for listening to this week's Infinite Story. If it resonated with you, send it to someone you think would be blessed by it. If you would like to share your story, please reach out to us at infiniteideas.studio. You never know how far the impact of your story can reach. Take care now.